Good morning, I'm Kyle Gatlin. I am senior pastor, and we're in the month of May. We're in the month of May. You know what that means, right? You know what the month of May means? That means a heavy dose of senioritis in high school. Y'all know that, right? Right? Kaylee, we got Kaylee right here. She's a senior. She's done with classes, I'm sure. She don't want to go anymore. Talk to Gage from Slocum. He only has 2 more days left, Kaylee. He only has 2 more days he has to go to school, right? You got more than that, don't you? Yeah, you got to go more. You went to the wrong school. You should have went to his school. You'll be out in 2 days. You'll be out in 2 days. You know, the high school seniors are being celebrated all month. In a couple of weeks, we're going to celebrate the seniors here at this church. You know, and nationwide, 2 out of 3 graduating seniors will go on to college. But normally, based on my observation from all of our graduating class here every year, about 90% will end up going to college of some sort. That's a lot. But those who are going to college, you know that 25 to 50% on average are not clear on what they're going to college for, right? And 75% of them will change their major. I myself did it 3 times in my first year at university. And it makes me think a little bit, truthfully, about that next step. About that next step. We're not real clear on it. And so it seems to me that so many of our high school graduates, as they move into college, they're simply going to college because that's sort of what they know. Well, I've been in school all my life. I guess I'm just going to keep going to school. When I'm not sure what to do next, I'm just going to have to go with what I know, right? And that's sort of what I want to get into this, our text with today, is going with what you know. And I did this. I truthfully did this. Why did I go to Auburn after graduating high school? Well, I'm supposed to. I've been in school. I'm going to keep going to school. Really had no clear direction of what I was going to do. But I'm just going to keep going to school. And that's what I knew. I knew, I go to school. That's my life. I go to school. So I was continuing to do, I went with what I know. I just go with what I know. Same thing happened when I went to graduate school, by the way. I ended up, the only reason I really stayed in graduate school where I was is because I went with what I knew, which was student ministry. I'd worked a couple summers. Last couple years of college, I worked a couple summers at a church north of Birmingham, and then got into another church up in Kentucky. I was going with what I know. You know, and sometimes when we don't know what is next, it's simply just simple to go with what we know. And I think that's where the disciples are. I think just like the high school graduates, when it's not clear what to do next, they went with what they knew. They went with what they knew. We find this story in John chapter 21. It happened this way. Simon Peter, Thomas also known as Didymus, Nathanael from Cana in Galilee, the sons of Zebedee, and 2 other disciples were together. I'm going out to fish, Simon Peter told them, and they said, we'll go with you. So they went out and got into the boat, but that night they caught nothing. Okay, where are we at? This is after the resurrection. Jesus has shown himself twice to the disciples. The first time he showed himself, according to John, we're going just strictly on John's account of Jesus' resurrection appearances. First time, he did say, I'm sending you out, but didn't give me details. The next time he appeared to him, that's when he proved himself to Thomas, hey, I'm really alive, quit doubting. There was no other further instructions. And so what we find here is the disciples went back to what they knew. They knew fishing. It was not so much they were rebelling, it was they were going with what they know. Because they didn't have any crystal clear direction. I mean, Jesus has sort of been vague about it. I'm sending you out, but didn't tell them anything really, details. So they had to go with what they know. And that was fishing. So, how did Jesus meet them? How did Jesus meet them? Early in the morning, Jesus stood on the shore, but the disciples did not realize it was Jesus. He called out to them, "Friends, haven't you any fish?" "No," they answered. He said, "Throw your net on the right side of the boat and you will find some." When they did, they were unable to haul the net in because of the large number of fish. Then the disciple whom Jesus loved said to Peter, "It is the Lord." As soon as Simon Peter heard him say, "It is the Lord," he wrapped his outer garment around him, for he had taken it off, and jumped into the water. So here's what I want you to remember from this portion of this story. You may not be where you should be, but Jesus knows exactly where to find you. You may not be where you should be, but Jesus knows exactly where to find you. And right now, most of us in this room are doing what we know, right? We have not been told to do anything different. So we're going to keep with what we know. But here's the deal. What we know and what we are doing may not be honoring God. What we know and what we're doing may not be something that God is pleased with. Or what we know and what we are doing may be taking us away from God. Or at minimum, not drawing us closer to God. So you may not be where you should be, but Jesus knows exactly where to find you. He knows exactly where to find you. See, the disciples, maybe they tried to hide in what they were doing. Maybe they were trying to hide there. I don't know. But they couldn't hide. They couldn't hide. David, King David from the Old Testament, he realized the same deal. Because he said this, "Where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence?" Now, this is King David saying this, and we don't have the context of when he wrote Psalm 139, but we have David's life in perspective. How many times do we see David having to go somewhere different than where he was? He had to actually leave what he knew to live, because his life was being threatened. Saul threatened his life. His own son Absalom threatened his life. David had his heart set on building a temple. Why did he want to build a temple? For the Ark of the Covenant. Y'all remember the Ark of the Covenant? Indiana Jones found it. Y'all remember that? All right. So the Ark of the Covenant was a symbol of God. But most of the early Jewish people believed where the ark was, that's where God was. Right? And that was the whole premise of the Indiana Jones thing, right? Was if the Nazis got this ark, then God would be with them. Misguided as it was, right? So that was this part of David's life that he had this. He wanted a place for the Ark of the Covenant. He wanted to build this temple. God said, "No, I'm not going to let you build this temple." But what I want you to understand is even though David wanted to build a place for the Ark of the Covenant, and even though the majority of the people believed that only God was going to be where that ark was, David knew something beyond that. David knew, where can I go from your spirit? Where can I flee from your presence? He knew that Ark of the Covenant was simply that. It was a symbol. It was not actually God's presence. And so he knew, no matter where I go, you're going to find me. No matter where I go, you will find me. You may not be where you should be, but Jesus knows exactly where to find you. And I want to add a little bit something different here. Because David was in caves, David was in different cities, and knowing that God was going to be with him. But I want to take it one little step forward, a little bit something different. Take our minds just a little bit different, because I don't want to think about these literal places, right? Because yeah, I would love, okay, God, if I go to Jamaica, will you find me? Yeah, I would love to go to Jamaica and let God find me there. I would love that, right? But here's something else I want you to think about. The places you go in your mind, those dark places. Those dark places. The places that you know I shouldn't be thinking about, I shouldn't be dwelling on, because they're totally opposite of what I believe, of what I know in my heart, but somehow evil gets in, and I start going in these places that I know I shouldn't be going. I'm thinking about things I shouldn't think about. I get these random thoughts, and they're taking seed in my mind, and I can't get them out. And I know I shouldn't be dwelling on these. You may not be where you should be, but Jesus knows exactly where to find you. So when you go to those places, He's going to find you. And He will find you. Where can you go from His Spirit? Nowhere. Where can you flee from His presence? Nowhere. Even in those dark places that you don't want to admit, that you will never tell anyone about, He will be there. He will be there. He will find you. So the disciples, when Jesus came upon the disciples, they realized it was Jesus when the net was full. The net was full. And I got to believe that they thought about, wait a second, a couple years ago, this just happened to us. In fact, 4 of those 7, we know it happened to. When Jesus was gathering His group of merry men together, and these 4 guys were fishing. They fished all night, according to Luke. And Jesus hollered at them, "Hey, did you catch anything?" "No." "Throw your net down again." They thought He was an idiot. Well, does He know? We've been fishing all night. We're professional fishermen. We know if you can't catch them at night, there's no way you can catch them in the daytime. But they did. They caught this huge thing of fish. Huge thing of fish. When Simon Peter saw this, he fell at Jesus' knees and said, "Go away from me, Lord, I am a sinful man." For he and all his companions were astonished at the catch of fish they had taken. And so were James and John, the sons of Zebedee, Simon's partners. Then Jesus said to Simon, "Don't be afraid. From now on, you will fish for people." So they pulled their boats up on shore, left everything, and followed Him. So the first time that Jesus encountered the disciples, this huge catch of fish, it caught their attention, and then they followed Him. They followed Him. And if this story is the question that has been on everybody's mind for years and years and centuries, what happened to all the fish? So Jesus does the same thing again. In the first encounter, when they caught all these fish, Jesus said, "Follow me." And then now they catch this thing of fish, huge thing of fish again. And I think it's another way of Jesus saying, "Guys, I still want you to follow me. You should have never ceased following me. We're just going to continue on. We're going to continue on with this." Jesus does something different with this catch of fish than He did in the first one. In the first one, they caught the fish, brought them to shore, left it all, followed Him. This time, they're bringing the fish to shore, and read what happened. Here's what happens. The other disciples followed in the boat, towing the net full of fish, for they were not far offshore, about 100 yards. When they landed, they saw a fire of burning coals there with fish on it and some bread. Jesus said to them, "Bring some of the fish you have just caught." So Simon Peter climbed back into the boat and dragged the net ashore. It was full of large fish, 153. Who counted, by the way? Anyone? But even with so many, the net was not torn. You know, fishermen do that, right? Fishermen exaggerate, so I guess they needed to count for sure so they can tell the story. We had 153 fish, and the net didn't break. Anyway, Jesus said to them, "Come and have breakfast." None of the disciples dared ask him, "Who are you?" They knew it was the Lord. Jesus came, took the bread, and gave it to them, and did the same with the fish. He added this. In the first count, they just gathered all the fish up, came to shore, left it all, followed him. In this account, they gathered the fish up, brought it to shore, and they ate breakfast. They had a meal. They had a meal. What's up with that? Is this simply something that, well, Jesus knew they had been fishing all night, so they were hungry? This was about nutrition? No, it was more than that. In Jewish tradition, sharing a meal just isn't about food. It symbolized acceptance, peace, and covenant. By preparing and sharing this breakfast, Jesus was extending restoration. He was extending reconciliation. There's another story where Jesus shared a meal. I'll go back to Matthew chapter 9, verse 10. While Jesus was having dinner at Matthew's house, he's already called Matthew, the tax collector, to follow him. So Matthew's already said, "Yes, I'm going to follow you." And then Jesus said, "Well, dude, let's go eat at your house." Then many tax collectors and sinners came and ate with him and his disciples. This was huge. This was huge because rabbis would never do this. Rabbis would never eat with these people in their home. Why? Because of the significance of the meal in Jewish tradition. So Jesus has already accepted Matthew, has already basically told Matthew, "You're a part of my group now. You're now reconciled to me. You're restored to the faith," because tax collectors would have been outside the tradition of the Jewish church at that time. And all these other people were the same way. They were outside of the church. They were not allowed to do anything related to the Jewish traditions of this day. Jesus is bringing them in. And by sharing a meal with them, he is saying, "I reconcile you to God. I restore you to a relationship with God. You are forgiven. You can live at peace with me and with my Father." See, here's what I think that Jesus wants to communicate to his disciples. To break bread is to mend what's broken. To break bread is to mend what is broken. Now, he conveyed this not to just Peter, because Peter, we're going to deal with Peter. The rest of this story is the encounter that he had with Jesus, this interchange with Peter and Jesus. We'll talk about that next week. But for here to understand, these 7 disciples were a part of the group that had denied Jesus, that had betrayed Jesus, that had abandoned Jesus, that deserted Jesus during his time of arrest, torture, crucifixion. So Jesus was coming to them, and by sharing a meal with them, he was restoring that relationship. This is a reconciliation meal. He's reconciling all those guys. The guys that had agreed to follow him a couple years ago, he's wanting them, hey, you're still in this. We're still in this together. And so he shares a meal with them so that they would know that they are forgiven and they're still connected with their rabbi. This is not just a one-off deal, by the way. This idea of a meal and bringing peace and restoration and reconciliation is scattered throughout the Bible. I'm going to show you a couple of them. In Genesis, there's a story about Isaac and Abimelech. Isaac was son of Abraham. Isaac was very successful in his own way. And he had moved to this area that Abimelech was in charge of, basically sort of like the governor of a territory, if you want to put it that way. And Isaac was doing really well. Isaac was prospering. Isaac was growing. His crops and his family was growing. Abimelech got a little jealous. And Abimelech ran him off. And Isaac had to go 2 or 3 different places before Abimelech figured out this is not right. And then he finds Isaac with a couple of his lieutenants, and he says, "We saw clearly that the Lord was with you." We saw clearly. In other words, when you were with me, Isaac, we saw clearly the Lord was with you. So we said there ought to be a sworn agreement between us and you. Let us make a treaty with you, that you will do us no harm, just as we did not harm you when you were with us, but always treated you well and sent you away peacefully. And now you are blessed by the Lord. Isaac then made a feast for them. They ate and drank. That was a meal of peace. That was a meal of reconciliation, a meal of restoration between the two parties. A few chapters later in Genesis, a guy named Jacob. Some of y'all might remember the guy named Jacob. This is the guy who was duped into marrying the wrong lady. That's happened to everybody, right? No, happened to nobody but Jacob. Tricked into marrying the wrong girl. How drunk do you have to be? Anyway, so Jacob was tricked into marrying the wrong girl, finally got the love of his life, but put 20 years in to Laban, the father of these 2 ladies, of Rachel and Leah. And 20 years, and at some point, Jacob's had enough is enough. I'm going to go back home. I'm going to go back to my land. And sort of in the middle of the night, he sort of took his family away from Laban. Laban chased him down. And they made up. They reconciled. They came to an agreement of, okay, yes, we're cool now. We're all good. Isaac then made a feast for them, and they ate and drank. They reconciled over a meal. I'm sorry, I looked at the wrong one. The next one, Genesis 31. This is where Jacob and Laban. Jacob says to his relatives, "Gather some stones." So they took stones and piled them in a heap, and they ate there by the heap. So after Laban and Jacob made this agreement, they ate together with a meal of reconciliation. Now, the next story, most of y'all remember, the prodigal son. The prodigal son, Jesus told the story about this prodigal son who took the money and run, met Bobby Sue, and had a good time. And when he finally came to his senses, and Bobby Sue had ran off with Billy Jack, whatever his name is, he came back home. And what did his father do? Said, "Bring the fatted calf and kill it. Let's have a feast and celebrate. For this son of mine was dead and is alive again. He was lost and is found." And they began to celebrate. He had a meal to reconcile with his son, to restore the relationship between he and his son. They had a reconciliation meal. Now, many of us who know the prodigal son story understand that not everybody went to this meal. The older brother. The older brother did not want to be reconciled to his brother. His older brother did not want to have a restored relationship, so he didn't go to the feast. He didn't go to the meal, because had he went, that would have signaled that all is well. Jesus tells us in Revelation 3:20, "Here I am, I stand at the door and knock. If anyone hears my voice and opens the door, I will come in and eat with that person, and they with me." See, when Jesus wants to have a relationship with us, the analogy here is that we eat together. That signifies a reconciliation between us and Jesus. Over the last couple of years, 2.5 years actually, it's been almost a standard practice. At least once a week, I'm meeting with somebody from this church, usually for breakfast or a lunch. And I tell you that because in each one of these meetings that I have, these lunch meetings, breakfast meetings, or whatever, and I'm just chatting with somebody from our church, when we leave that meal, we're good. But between the two of us, we're good. And that does not mean that every person that I'm meeting with and eating a meal with is going to remain part of this church. But our relationship is good. And that's what we need to understand today about our meal. You see, that this breakfast that Jesus had with these disciples on the shore foreshadows every time we celebrate what we call the Lord's Supper or Holy Communion.